Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I've got for you 3 techniques that very few anglers utilize, and I'm telling you, these catch a ton of fish. So I'm going to walk you through each of these 3 techniques, give you the where and when I like to use them, and hopefully you can apply this to your fishing and catch a couple of extra bass this way as well. Now, before I do get into them, I want to remind you guys that I do a bunch of lake breakdowns with fishthemoment.com. So if you're looking for a little bit of help on either a local lake or a lake you're going to on vacation, you might want to check out those lake breakdowns. I'll put a link for that in the video description. Also, if you're looking for more content from me, check out my members only page. You can go to my YouTube homepage, click the join button, find everything you need to find out about the members only page as well there. All right, so hopefully it's tips like this that keep you coming back to the channel. So a lot of these techniques that anglers aren't using are either generated from my own experience or from other pros that I know are implementing these with a lot of success. So the first one that I've got for you is this guy right here. So this is just a 3/4 ounce Picasso double willow spinnerbait. You look at it and say, everyone's throwing a spinnerbait. Well, it's not necessarily the spinnerbait that I'm talking about. It's how I want you to fish it. Now, this to me can be an outstanding speed burn spinnerbait right under the surface. So you're basically waking the spinnerbait. Now, this is not necessarily a technique that's unknown. Most people, though, will say if you're going to wake a spinnerbait under the surface, you throw it with a big Colorado blade and not willow leaf blades. And to me, there's absolutely a time and a place for that. But there is very much a time and a place for using a heavy spinnerbait, double willow leaf, and burning it under the surface. And the reason you want a heavy one and a double willow leaf is because you want to reel this bait almost as fast as you can to keep it right under the surface. A 3/4 ounce specifically, I love, means you got to burn it to keep it up under the surface to the point where your blades every once in a while will blow out, but you're really retrieving this extremely fast. Now, for me, this is very much a clear water technique. You're going to be fishing it in a lot of the same places you like to fish, say, a topwater bait. You're trying to draw the fish up to the surface because they think it's some fleeing bait fish. Every once in a while, these willow leaf blades will slap the surface and it just creates a broken retrieve, which generates reaction strikes from the fish. But it is very much a unique retrieve because you're really trying to retrieve this almost as fast as you can just to keep it right up under the surface versus your slow retrieve of a big Colorado blade, which is keeping your spinnerbait near the cover that you're fishing. This is an absolutely dynamite technique if you're around spotted bass and smallmouth. This is not something that's kind of a secret on the Great Lakes, but it is something that is very underutilized across the rest of the country. So grab yourself a big 3/4 ounce double willow leaf spinnerbait, and you're going to have to burn this to keep it under the surface. But I'm telling you, you will have some of the most vicious strikes you've ever had. Like, so hang on to your rod with that. So that's the first technique that I think is underutilized. The second technique is kind of similar to that in terms of grabbing yourself a big crankbait. So a big deep diving crankbait. This is a Berkley Dime 15. I love it for this technique. I'm going to be fishing this in, like, I'm going to say 6 foot of water or less. I want a big deep diving crankbait that is going to grind into the bottom. This is a technique that a lot of pros are using. You throw in a big crankbait, a deep diving crankbait, one that generally goes, I'm going to say goes at least twice the depth that you're fishing. So generally speaking, you hear people talk about fishing a crankbait where you want it to get down to that depth and tick the bottom. I'm not talking about ticking the bottom. I'm talking about grinding a path in the bottom back to the boat. You want to create a smoke trail all the way back. So in this case, this Dime 15 gets down to about 15 feet of water. I'm going to be fishing this in probably 8 foot of water or less. But I'm talking a lot of times about fishing it in like 3 or 4 feet of water. Because the reason this is such a good technique, one, you're obviously creating bottom contact, but because you're creating such good bottom contact, the bait isn't coming at you and just ticking. It's actually grabbing the bottom and it'll run for like 3 feet to one side and then kind of counter back and run way off to the other side. So on the retrieve, your bait is really serpentining very, very erratically back to the boat. Great way to generate strikes. And on that entire retrieve, generally speaking, regardless of bottom composition, it creates like a smoke trail. And that smoke trail is something that a lot of fish like to follow because they know something's going on, but they don't know exactly what it is. And your big deep diving crankbaits with these big bills are great for this technique. And most anglers are not doing it because they're too worried about throwing a big bait and grinding it into the bottom. But I'm telling you, this is a great way to generate really good strikes from fish and is very, very underutilized. The last technique is to rig your soft stick bait weedless or wacky rig, but not to fish it on a wacky rig. I want you to fish it on a drop shot. This is a technique that a lot of people are utilizing to basically give them a wacky rig, but allow them to fish it much deeper and much more efficiently. So one recommendation with this would be not necessarily to use a short leader, but to go with a longer leader. I've actually done videos about how I like to fish a weightless wacky rig very deep in terms of having a free sliding bait on your line. And I can do another one of those for you because it's been probably 3 years since I did that video. But the reality here is, at a minimum, fish it on a drop shot with a long leader, say a 3-foot leader. So when your bait is tight and you let that bait go slack, you get it to fall just like a wacky rig. And that allows you to fish a weightless wacky rig in 35 feet of water if you want. You can do it very, very efficiently versus having to wait for a weightless wacky rig to fall all the way to the bottom. This is a technique that a lot of pros are using. They're having a lot of success with it. And generally speaking, they're not telling you that they're wacky rigging their bait on a drop shot. They're just saying they caught it on a drop shot. So the general idea there is they're fishing some form of drop shot minnow, but in a lot of cases, it's just the traditional wacky rig worm. So give that a try as well. Those are 3 techniques that are extremely underutilized by the majority of anglers. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the video or to the channel if you haven't already. Stay tuned, we'll have a new one coming out tomorrow.